Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, I want to start by asking you to visualize a very specific setting.
Okay. All right.
I want you to picture yourself sitting in a room that just feels a little too quiet. Maybe it's a church pew with that distinct smell of old wood and polish.
Oh, yeah. Or like a folding chair in a community center with those fluorescent lights humming right overhead.
Exactly. And you're likely dressed in something uncomfortable, right? Like a suit that's a bit too tight or a dress you only pull out of the closet for really serious occasions.
Right.
And in your hands, you're holding a folded piece of paper. Maybe you're nervously rolling the corner of it between your thumb and forefinger.
It's such a universal experience. You're staring at the photo on the cover.
Uh,
It's an object that is practically ubiquitous in our culture,
oh, well,
at least in Western culture. Yet it is completely invisible until the exact moment you actually need one.
spot on. We are talking, of course, about the funeral program or, the order of service or the memorial folder, depending on where you grew up.
Yeah, it have a lot of names.
It does. But today, we aren't just reminiscing about funerals in general. We're digging into a really fascinating piece of research titled The Essential Guide to Funeral Program Templates.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, sounds incredibly dry on the surface.
Oh, it really does.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like we are about to discuss tax forms or Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, you'd right.
Templates. It's a word that just screams bureaucracy. It sounds administrative. It sounds cold.
It does.
But the mission for our deep dive today is to completely flip that assumption for you.
Right. We need to look at this strictly through the lens of design, psychology, and really modern ritual. We aren't just talking about stationery here.
No, definitely not.
We are analyzing a tool, a piece of technology, really, that helps human beings navigate one of the most chaotic biological and emotional experiences they will ever face.
We're talking about the mechanics of mourning.
Oh, that's the perfect phrase for it. The core question the research poses, and what we really want to answer over the next hour or so, is this. How does a preset layout, a rigid, standardized set of margins, boxes, and font choices actually facilitate emotional release?
Right.
How does structure help when your internal world is just completely falling apart?
It's the paradox of the template, isn't it? Usually when we talk about creativity or emotion, we think standardization is the enemy.
Right. We think a template kills the vibe.
Exactly. But the argument in our source material here is that standardization is actually a safety net.
Precisely. And the source tracks this massive cultural shift. We've moved from what I'd call institutional control, where a funeral director just handed you a generic card and basically said, pick one.
Right, here are your three options.
Yeah, to the family empowerment, where the grieving are the ones actually taking the reins and designing the narrative.
Okay, so before we get into the history and the design theory, let's start with the psychology. Section 1 of our roadmap today is really the why. Why do these things even exist?
It's a fair question.
I mean, functionally, couldn't someone just stand up at the front of the room and say, okay, folks, welcome. First, we're going to sing a hymn. Then Bob is going to talk. Then we're going to the cemetery. Why do we need the actual paper?
Well, the source describes a dual purpose that I find really fascinating.
Yeah.
The first is the most obvious, but we so often overlook it. It is a practical roadmap.
Okay. But you have to understand why a roadmap matters in this specific context, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Much deeper than just knowing what time the reception lunch is being served.
Right, right.
Think about the cognitive state of the average attendee at a funeral. You walk into that room, anxiety is incredibly high. Social awkwardness is just through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
You're wondering, where do I sit? Is it okay to talk right now? Am I going to cry in front of total strangers?
Absolutely. There is that mortality salience kicking in, that acute awareness of your own death just by being in the room. Everyone is on edge.
Exactly. That uncertainty creates a low-level physiological stress. Your cortisol is spiking. So the program is fundamentally an anxiety management tool.
An anxiety management tool. That's a great way to put it.
It tells the audience, here is the beginning, here is the middle, and here is the end. It creates a safe container for the whole event.
So when I sit down and I see on the paper that the eulogy is followed by a song and then the dismissal, my brain can kind of just relax.
You can surrender to the experience. You don't have to be on guard wondering what's coming next. The logistics are accounted for. The source argues that this allows the attendees to actually grieve rather than just worrying about their social performance.
That makes total sense. It's like user experience, UX design, but for a funeral.
That's a great analogy, yeah. UX for grief.
But then there's the second purpose the source highlights, which I think resonates even more with me personally, the tangible keepsake.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
This is the shift from a bulletin, which is essentially trash, to a tribute, which is a treasure.
Right.
The research points out a stark reality of modern life. We live in a digital world now. We don't print photos anymore. We don't write physical letters.
No, we really don't. If I die tomorrow, my legacy is basically a bunch of JPEGs on a cloud server somewhere.
Right. But a funeral is one of the very few remaining events where we produce a physical artifact. The source explicitly notes that these items are kept long after the ceremony ends.
I can definitely vouch for this. I have a shoebox in my closet. I think most people do, right?
I have one too.
I have programs from funerals I went to 10, maybe 15 years ago. People I wasn't even that close to, if I'm being honest. But I just can't bring myself to throw them away.
Why do you think that is?
It just feels, I don't know, disrespectful. Like, if I throw this piece of paper in the recycling bin along with the grocery flyers and the junk mail, I'm throwing them away.
Exactly. That's the artifact quality. When the flowers wilt, and they always do within a week, and the casserole dishes are washed and returned to the neighbors, this piece of paper is often the absolute only physical thing that remains of the event.
It's the only proof it happened, in a way.
Right. It migrates from the church pew to the family Bible, or the scrapbook, or that memory box in your closet. It becomes a permanent anchor.
Okay, so if that's the function anxiety reduction for the guests and legacy preservation for the family, let's talk about the creation of the thing.
The hard part.
Right. This is where the concept of the template really comes in. The source defines it as a ready-made layout. But I want to push on this a bit. Why is the ready-made part so absolutely critical? Why not just open a blank Word document and start typing?
To answer that, we really have to look at how the human brain functions under extreme stress. Have you ever heard of decision fatigue?
Sure, it's the reason why successful CEOs wear the exact same outfit every day. They don't want to waste their brain power on choosing a shirt.
Exactly. Now, apply that concept to profound grief. When you're grieving, your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for executive function, logic, planning, and complex decision-making, is effectively offline.
It's just shut down.
It is severely compromised. You are living in a thick fog.
I've been there. Simple questions like, what do you want for dinner? Feel like someone is asking you to solve a calculus problem.
Yes. So imagine the cruelty of handing someone in that fragile state a completely blank sheet of paper and saying, okay, design a tribute that perfectly encapsulates 80 years of a complex human life.
Oh, man.
Oh, and make sure you choose the right fonts, set the margins correctly so the printer doesn't cut it off, and balance the white space so it looks dignified.
I would crumble. I would absolutely freeze and just stare at the blinking cursor.
Most people would.
Yeah.
It is a recipe for a total meltdown. The template solves the problem of cognitive scarcity. It removes the structural decision-making entirely from the equation.
It basically says, don't think about the margins. We already did the margins.
Exactly. It says the photo goes here, the name goes here, the poem goes here. It creates a rigid framework so that the family can focus entirely on the content.
That makes so much sense.
You aren't worrying about being an architect from scratch. You just have to be the decorator.
That is a profound distinction. It frees up your mental bandwidth. You aren't worrying about whether the text is perfectly centered. You're worrying about whether Psalm 23 or Ecclesiastes is more appropriate to honor your dad.
Exactly. It allows you to do the emotional work because the technical work is already handled. And that is why the template isn't a constraint. It's actually a liberation.
So let's look at the history here, because as the source points out, this hasn't always been the case. The research tracks an evolution from the institutional to the personal. Take us back to the before times. What did this look like in, say, 1990?
It was a purely institutional product back then. If you lost someone, you went to the local funeral home. You sat in a very quiet, heavily carpeted office with a funeral director.
Right.
And at some point in that long planning meeting, they would pull out the binder.
I can picture it perfectly. Thick vinyl cover, clear plastic sleeves, probably smells like old paper and coffee.
Yes. And inside that binder, you had a very limited menu, maybe 6 options total. Option A is the sunset. Option B is the praying hands. Option C is the single rose. Option D is the cross.
And that was it. No other choices.
That was essentially it. You picked a design. You gave them the vital statistics, birth date, death date, location of the service, and they handle the rest behind closed doors. It was just part of the package.
It feels very clinical when you describe it like that, like checking a box on a medical intake form. I'll take the sunset, please.
It was incredibly efficient for the institution, but it was distant for the family. The text was generic boilerplate. The fonts were Standard Times New Roman or maybe a stiff script
It
font.
got the job done, sure.
Right? It communicated the time and place, but it didn't necessarily feel like the person you lost. It reflected the funeral home's branding and capabilities way more than the deceased's personality.
So when did this start to change? What triggered the shift away from the binder?
The source identifies the DIY revolution as the major pivot point here. And this was really driven by two intersecting things: the accessibility of home computing and the rise of the internet.
Right. Everybody suddenly had a PC.
Exactly. Suddenly, families didn't need a professional printing press down the street. They had high-quality inkjet printers in their home offices. They had word processor.
Or just because you can do it yourself doesn't mean it actually looks good. I mean, we've all seen really bad DIY graphic design attempts.
Oh, definitely. And that is exactly where the source specifically mentions a company called the Funeral Program site as a massive key player in this evolution.
Okay, the funeral program site.
Yeah, they are identified in the text as the industry leader and originator of this whole modern concept because they essentially professionalized the DIY approach.
Why them specifically, though? There must have been other people putting files online.
There were, but the Funeral Program site brought high-end graphic design principles, things like visual balance, professional typography, color theory, and packaged them into accessible, downloadable files that regular grieving people could just open and use in Microsoft Word.
Ah, I see.
The source notes they redefined the expectation of what a family could produce at home.
That's a really significant distinction. It's the true democratization of design.
Exactly. It meant that you didn't need to hire a freelance graphic designer or pay the funeral home a massive markup to have a dignified, beautiful send-off. You could download a template for a few bucks that looked like it cost $500 to design, and you could edit it yourself at your kitchen table at 2 in the morning.
And that naturally leads to the massive shift in content. We move from generic symbols in a vinyl binder to hyper-personalization.
Yes. If your dad wasn't really a sunset guy, but he was an avid fisherman or a mechanic or an incredible gardener, you can now easily find a template that reflected that specific visual language. It moved the document from "this is a funeral" to "this is his funeral."
It feels like a massive reclamation of control by the families.
That is the central key theme running throughout the source material: transparency and family-led decision-making. You aren't handing your precious memories over to a total stranger to format. You are handling them yourself.
Okay, so we understand the why and the history now. I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of the document itself. Section 3 of our deep dive is the anatomy of a tribute.
Let's do it.
I want to walk through this standard document page by page, almost like we are dissecting it on a table, because there clearly is a logic to the layout.
There absolutely is. And sticking to that established anatomy is what prevents the document from feeling cluttered or chaotic to the reader.
So let's start at the front door, the cover.
The cover is the hero shot. In web design terms, it's the landing page. Obviously, you have the name and the dates. We expect that. But the critical element here that the source points out is the title.
Right. The source explicitly mentions meaningful titles. So instead of just stamping funeral service at the top, seeing things like a celebration of life or in loving memory.
Exactly. It frames the mindset of the attendee before they even open the page. It sets the emotional tone for the next hour. Is this a somber traditional service? Is this a joyful reflection? Is this a homegoing?
It tells you how to feel.
Yes. But the most important visual element on the cover is, of course, the photo. The template usually guides the family to use a high-resolution, specific type of portrait. It centers the subject visually and emotionally.
Okay, then you open it up. Usually the left side or the first inside right page is the order of service.
The roadmap we discussed earlier. Now, the source notes that including this in a preset template ensures no design imbalance.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, the order of service is a very text-heavy section. If you try to freehand this in a blank document, you almost always end up with weird, awkward spacing, or you completely run out of room at the bottom of the page.
Oh, we've all seen that. Hymn number 4. Oh no, out of paper. Let me just squeeze it in down here in tiny 8-point font.
Exactly. The template mathematically handles the leading line, which is the professional term, for the space between the lines of text, so it looks clean and professional. It lists the speakers, the music, the readings. It creates a steady visual rhythm.
And then we get to the heart of the program, the obituary or the life tribute.
This is the storytelling engine of the entire document.
Yeah.
In the old binder era we talked about, this was very often just a dry stat sheet.
Right. Born here, worked at this factory for 40 years, survived by these 3 people, died on this date.
The resume of death.
Wow. Harsh, but true.
It's true. But the new template style encourages an actual narrative. It creates dedicated space for a real story. It subtly invites you to talk about their character, their inside jokes, their personal struggles and triumphs. And crucially, it pairs that text with visuals.
Visuals, plural, not just the one photo from the cover.
Right. Collages. The source emphasizes that modern templates now accommodate stages of life. You see the black and white baby photo, the awkward teenage photo, the wedding photo, the retirement party photo.
It visualizes the actual passage of time.
It shows the fullness of the life lived, not just the end of it.
I've noticed a lot of them include poems or scripture verses interwoven in there too.
Those act as visual breaks. A massive block of text can be really intimidating to read, especially for someone who is already emotional. A well-placed quote or scripture, properly aligned by the template's margins, gives the reader's eye a place to rest. It allows them to pause and reflect on what they just read.
And then we reach the back cover.
The final impression. This is usually reserved for the acknowledgement.
The thank yous.
Yes, the public thank yous to the pallbearers, the flower ladies, the people who brought food to the house, the hospice nurses. And typically, it ends with a final image or a comforting sunset quote. It's the period at the end of the sentence.
The source talks a lot about balance in this section. It explicitly mentions proper spacing, alignment, typography. Is this just aesthetic vanity? I mean, does it really matter if the margins are a quarter inch off on a funeral program?
It matters immensely. Think about how human beings subconsciously judge quality and care. If you get a document where the text is crooked or the fonts clash, like mixing formal Times New Roman with playful Comic Sans, or the photos are highly pixelated and blurry, what does your brain immediately tell you?
It looks sloppy. It looks like a rushed afterthought.
It signals a lack of care. And in the very sensitive context of a funeral, a lack of care directly translates to a lack of respect.
Oh, wow.
A polished, balanced, professional-looking program conveys to the room that this person mattered. The dignity of the design actively reflects the dignity of the life.
That's a really powerful connection. The design quality is basically a proxy for honor.
Exactly. The template handles the professional side, the math of the layout, so the family can pour all their love into the personal side without worrying for a second that they are somehow disrespecting their loved one with a messy, amateurish document.
Okay, let's move to the physical form of this document. Section 4 of our outline, form meets function. We are talking about the hardware, the paper, the fold, and the software used to make it.
We have so many more choices now than just the simple folded card. The source outlines the main formats available today. First, you have the bifold.
The classic, one standard sheet of paper folded right down the middle.
Simple, elegant, 4 panels to work with. It's perfect for a standard religious service where you don't need to write a novel. It's concise and traditional,
But then you have the trifold.
like a travel brochure. 3 vertical panels. The source notes this offers additional space while remaining very compact. It fits easily into a suit jacket pocket or a small purse. And it creates a really natural segmentation of the information. You can put the obituary text on one panel, the order of service on the center panel, and all the family photos on the third. It separates the data logically.
But the source points out a really interesting rising trend here, the booklet.
Yes, the memorial program booklet. This is a multi-page document, and it's saddle-stitched.
Saddle-stitched. That sounds intense.
Oh, that's just standard printing industry speak for stapled in the spine, like a magazine or a comic book.
Got it. Okay, so why is the booklet becoming so much more popular now?
Because we simply have more to say now. And crucially, we have way more photos.
Oh, true.
In the age of the smartphone, we have thousands of digital photos of our loved ones. A single piece of paper folded in half just can't hold them all. Families want comprehensive keepsakes. They want the detailed, long-form obituary, not just the short, expensive newspaper version.
They want the whole photo spread of the 50th anniversary party.
Exactly. The booklet allows the program to expand into a mini biography.
A mini memoir.
Precisely. It officially transitions the document from a guide to the service into a guide to the life.
Now, let's talk about the software side of things. The digital accessibility. The source specifically mentions compatibility with tools people already know, like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Apple Pages, Canva.
This is that democratizing factor we mentioned earlier. You don't need an expensive subscription to Adobe InDesign. You don't need to know what kerning or leading or CMYK actually means.
Right.
If you can type an email to your grandma, you can design a beautiful funeral program. The barrier to entry is effectively zero now.
The hybrid application mentioned in the source is really interesting to me, too, this idea of remote collaboration.
Oh, this is huge for modern families.
Huh.
Think about it. Families are rarely living in the exact same zip code anymore. You might be living in New York, your sister is over in London, and the funeral's taking place back home in Ohio.
So how does the template actually help with that distance?
Because it's a digital file now, like a shared Google Doc or a live Canva link,
Mm.
you can all work on it simultaneously from different continents.
Oh, I see.
You can be in the file saying, hey, I'm uploading the photos of Dad's fishing trip. And your sister can say, okay, I'm editing the obituary text right now to include that funny story about the dog. It allows the family to grieve together through the shared work, even if they are physically apart.
That's surprisingly touching. A shared digital workspace functioning as a modern grieving circle.
It really is. And it supports hybrid services too.
Yeah.
You can easily generate and include QR codes in the printed program that link to a live stream of the service for people who couldn't fly in, or an online memorial page where people can leave comments and memories. The physical paper literally bridges the gap to the digital world.
Now, one technical thing the source harps on quite a bit is printing logistics. It mentions margins and bleeds. Can you explain that to me like I'm 5? Why does the template need to handle this?
Okay, sure. Imagine you have a beautiful photo of a landscape that you want to go all the way to the very edge of the paper. No white border at all. That's called a bleed. But most standard home printers physically can't print edge to edge. They automatically leave a 1/4-inch white border. And professional print shops, on the other hand, actually print on larger paper and need a little extra image extending past the cut line to trim off so you don't get a sliver of white if the blade shifts.
Okay, I follow you so far.
If you don't know this industry secret and you just design your own file from scratch in Word, you might put important text right at the very edge of the page. Then the professional printer cuts it, and suddenly, in loving memory, becomes unloving memory.
Oh, no.
Or even worse, you accidentally chop off the top of someone's head in the main family photo.
That would be a disaster, an absolute disaster on the morning of the funeral.
Exactly. The professional template has these safe zones and bleed margins already built in behind the scenes. It ensures that the text is kept safely away from the cut lines and the fold lines. It actively prevents the heartbreaking mistake of ruining the keepsake just because you didn't have a degree in print theory.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about the paper itself? The source lists several options like standard paper, cardstock, linen finishes, matte coatings. Does the literal texture of the paper really change the experience that much?
Touch is a profound sense. We so often forget that in our totally screen-based world,
We really do.
a textured linen finish feels formal. It feels traditional and substantial. It feels like old money or high church. A glossy, thick cardstock, on the other hand, feels modern, celebratory, and bright, kind of like a high-end magazine.
Right.
The paper choice actively communicates the weight and tone of the event. A flimsy piece of standard copy paper feels cheap and disposable. A heavy cardstock feels permanent.
It subtly signals to the guest, keep this, do not throw this away when you get to your car.
Exactly. The tactile experience adds tangible value to the memory.
I want to pivot to section 5 of our deep dive because this is where the research gets really psychologically deep, the emotional and therapeutic value. The source actually claims that the process of making the program is therapeutic in itself.
Yes, process is therapy. It's a very recognized and powerful concept in grief counseling.
But isn't it just another exhausting chore? I mean, when you're planning a funeral, the list is endless. I have to order the flowers, I have to call the caterer, I have to pick out a casket, I have to make the program. It just feels like another task on a terrible to-do list.
It can definitely start as a chore, yes. But unlike ordering flowers, where you were just looking at a screen and picking catalog number 42, designing the program actually forces you to deeply engage with the memory of the person who died. Think about what you're actually doing when you build it.
Well, you're looking at old photos.
You're digging through literal shoe boxes of old photos in the attic. You are seeing them happy, young, vibrant, maybe before they got sick. You are rereading old letters or emails to find the perfect quote. You are sitting around a table debating with your siblings about which specific story captures his absolute essence.
Right. Was he more of a jokester or was he a serious guy? Which photo actually shows his real smile, not his posed smile?
Exactly. You are practicing what therapists call active grieving. You are actively curating their legacy. And that offers a profound sense of purpose.
Purpose. I like that.
In those few chaotic days between the actual death and the funeral service, you so often feel completely helpless. You can't fix the core situation. The person is gone. But you can fix the kerning on the program. You can make sure that one photo looks absolutely perfect. It gives you a tiny bit of control over a small piece of the chaos.
It basically turns a passive experience, just absorbing the loss, into an active experience of creation.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And this naturally leads into the ideas of personalization and cultural adaptability that the source talks about. The template is described as intentionally flexible.
Meaning it works for everyone.
It works for every tradition. Think about the incredible variety of end-of-life rituals we have. A traditional Catholic Mass is very rigid. There is an opening prayer, the liturgy of the Word, the liturgy of the Eucharist. You need a template that follows that specific ancient structure perfectly.
Right. It has to be in order.
But a modern celebration of life might be totally freeform. It might be an open mic, a video tribute, a tequila toast, and a balloon release.
And the same core template structure can morph to fit either of those extremes.
Yes. The template provides the structural walls, but you get to arrange the furniture inside however you need to. And culturally, too, think about the visual imagery. A blank template can easily incorporate intricate Celtic knots for an Irish family heritage, or bright African kente cloth patterns, or soft Asian cherry blossoms, or specific military insignias for a decorated veteran.
It respects the overarching tradition while allowing total freedom for the individual expression.
Exactly. It serves as a vessel. It holds the water of whatever specific tradition you need to pour into it without leaking or breaking. It validates the specific cultural way that a family chooses to grieve.
We're coming toward the end of our dive here, and Section 6 of the text summarizes why families are switching. We've touched on all of these organically, but let's synthesize them for the listener. Why are people walking away from the traditional funeral home package in such huge numbers?
The expert analysis in the text really boils it down to four main drivers. First, as we've discussed, is control. People today are just used to curating their own lives. We do it every day on Instagram and Facebook.
True.
We are accustomed to controlling our own narrative. So families don't want to outsource the curation of their final narrative or their loved one's final narrative to a business. They want total oversight.
That makes total sense. We are fundamentally a DIY culture now. Second on the list is cost.
Funerals are incredibly expensive. The average traditional funeral is thousands and thousands of dollars. If a family can save $300 or $400 simply by buying a template and printing the programs themselves or taking the file to a local copy shop, that really matters to them.
Absolutely.
It allows them to reallocate that money to spend on nicer flowers or better food for the reception or even a memorial donation to a charity.
Third is speed.
This is critical. Death is so often unexpected. You usually only have 3 or 4 days to pull this massive event together. You simply can't wait for a professional graphic designer's proofing and revision turnaround times. You need it right now.
Right.
A downloadable template is instant. You can download it at 2 in the morning, finish editing it by 4 in the morning, and have it printing by 9 in the morning.
And the fourth driver is involvement, that emotional investment we spent time discussing.
It just simply means more to everyone when you made it yourself. It's a labor of love. It's often the very final physical gift you can give to the person who died.
And there's a final point the source makes alongside those four peace of mind.
Yes. Knowing the layout is already balanced and mathematically correct, it entirely removes the fear of making an embarrassing mistake. It's the safety net we talked about. It allows you to feel totally confident that you aren't embarrassing yourself, your family, or the deceased in front of all their friends.
So as we close this out, we are left with the profound idea of the lasting artifact.
We really have to remember that for a vast majority of people, the funeral program is the one and only biography that will ever be written about them.
Wow.
Not everyone gets a grand, multi-column New York Times obituary. For most of us living normal lives, this folded piece of paper is the official, final record of our existence.
That is a really heavy thought.
It is. It physically captures names, dates, and family relationships that, as the source says, might otherwise be lost to time entirely. A great-grandchild born 10 years from now can pick up that booklet from a box in the attic and actually know who their grandfather was.
Yeah.
They can see his face, they can read his unique story, they can understand what his core values were.
It's basically genealogy captured in a brochure.
It's a tangible bridge between generations.
Here is the final thought I really want to leave our listeners with today. We've spent this entire hour talking about templates. Usually in everyday life, that word implies conformity, cookie cutter, boring.
Right.
We naturally think of a template as something that makes us all exactly the same.
But in this highly specific context, the template is actually the exact tool that unlocks unique individual expression.
That's the ultimate irony here. By using a standardized roadmap provided by industry leaders like the funeral program site, families aren't outsourcing their grief at all. They are using the tool to take total ownership of it.
They're using the rigid structure to tell the beautiful, messy truth about a life lived, in their own words, with their own hands. They are taking the blank spaces provided by the template and filling them with love.
It really forces you to ask yourself a question. If you had to sit down and design your own booklet right now, what chapters would actually be in it? What photos would make the final cut? What theme would your template be? Would you go with the traditional sunset, or would it be something entirely different that captures who you really are?
It's a question absolutely worth asking. It clarifies what really matters while we're still here.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the surprisingly profound world of funeral stationery.
Thanks so much for having me.
Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.